Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. It's almost impossible to keep up with the news cycle these days. Yesterday, a huge press conference, a combined press conference of President Trump and Bibi Netanyahu announcing, in what Trump proclaimed in his words, an eternal peace being worked out, a forever peace. These were his words between Israel and its neighbors, okay, as part of some ceasefire or end of the war with Hamas and Gaza. Okay, remember, this isn't being proclaimed as some sort of ceasefire, it's being proclaimed as a peace to end all war, at least in that part of the world, between Israel and its neighbors forever. Now, of course, that press conference and its contents merit an episode in its entirety just on that subject. But I haven't had the opportunity yet to parse through every bit of it and to parse through the Israeli commentary on their various news channels and media concerning that. And I will usually not race to put up a video on a news breaking event until I've really had a chance to let the pieces lay and to parse through them and basically to be able to divide truth from fiction. So, Steve, what is today's episode about? Well, as I'm drinking my morning coffee, and thank you for all of you that have treated me to my coffee, and I'm reading the Bible, and between reading the Bible, I'm looking at some of the news. It turns out that Charlie Kirk's letter to Bibi Netanyahu, which has been the focus of so much conspiracy theories and allegations that Charlie Kirk, towards the end of his life, abandoned Israel, saw the light, realized that Israel's not the Israel, of the Bible, and that Israel's committing genocide. And this is in addition to other allegations that Charlie was praying the rosary and converting to Catholicism. Uh, Allegations, of course, in which the dead Charlie Kirk is not able to defend himself. But in the last day or so, the entirety of Charlie Kirk's letter to Bibi Netanyahu, which rose to the fore of the news cycle shortly after Charlie was murdered, because if you remember, Benjamin Netanyahu he went on air with Fox News to extend his condolences to Charlie's family and followers, and he read the very first sentence of this letter, and then he concluded without reading any more of the letter. And of course, this caused all the Israel haters, namely Candace Owens, to allege that there was something hidden in that letter in which Charlie tells Netanyahu that he's losing he's losing Charlie's support for Israel and for the Jewish cause, okay, or for the Jewish people. This, of course, is not only what Candace says, but of course many others who have become part of what's called often the woke right, okay, or the anti-Jewish or anti-Israel right, as opposed to the woke left, which is also anti-Jewish and anti-Israel. So I have the entirety of the letter that Charlie wrote to Benjamin Netanyahu, not just that first sentence that Bibi read from in his eulogy or condolences to Charlie's family. I'm going to read the entirety of the letter to you because it's important. It's got some amazing content in it. And of course, it reveals that Charlie was nowhere near abandoning Israel. Okay, in fact, the letter betrays the opposite. Okay, that Charlie was concerned about Israel losing its PR war. And here he's suggesting to Netanyahu that Israel go on the offensive in the PR war, not just in the shooting war, and not outsource that war to surrogates such as Charlie himself. Okay, and I'm just going to read to you the letter, and you'll see all this. Okay, so let's begin. From the desk of Charlie Kirk, dear Mr. Prime Minister. Sorry, I got to make sure that this microphone is on. I'll start all over again. From the desk of Charlie Kirk. Dear Mr. Prime Minister, one of my greatest joys as a Christian is advocating for Israel and forming alliances with Jews in the fight to protect Judeo Christian civilization. Most recently, I am proud to have taken over Ambassador Huckabee's show on TBN, where we continually support Israel and the Jewish people. As Mohammedism spreads into Western societies, it's critical that Jews and Christians stay united in the effort to contain and roll back radical Islam and Sharia law. I regret to report that anti Israel and anti Semitic trends are at record levels on social media. These negative sentiments then flow downstream into college campuses and even seep into the conservative MAGA community. My team and I have spent months analyzing these trends and debating ideas that could help you and your country push back against these disturbing developments. Anti Israel sentiment can undermine American support for Israel. The purpose of this letter is to lay out our concerns and outline potential remedies. Everything written here is from a place of deep love for Israel and the Jewish people. I think it's important to be brutally honest with those you love. In my opinion, Israel is losing the information war and needs a communications intervention, in quotes. I started to compose this letter to you on Easter. I should have been focused on my family, but I was getting bombarded with messages about the Israeli army making it difficult for Christians to access church in Jerusalem on Easter. At the time, I did not see any official statements pushing back on this narrative. It was frustrating because pro Israel surrogates like me should not be in charge of fact checking every piece of anti Israel misinformation that pours into social media. It wasn't just Easter. On my recent campus tours, half the questions I get about are Israel. I'm sorry, half the questions I get are about Israel, and they're all negative. Now, this is amazing because I mentioned in the last episode or a couple episodes ago that I did that Charlie Kirk had said that most of the questions he gets on college campuses are about Israel, but I had no idea that it was 50%. Now, if you've seen his videos, and it's on, by the way, on the Charlie Kirk YouTube channel as opposed to the Turning Point YouTube channel, if you watch the hours and hours of campus appearances of Charlie, you do get some Israel questions in the recordings that are uploaded, but it's not that dominant. And this is obvious because Charlie's team has had to edit out a huge chunk of these appearances on campus, 50% of which, according to this letter, have to do with Israel. Okay, so this is what Charlie meant when he said that there's this obsession with Israel on college campuses, and he was absolutely floored by this obsession and somewhat dismayed. Okay, and here he says it's actually 50% of the questions that he fielded on these college campuses had to do with Israel. Okay, going on here. I often spend half my time on these campus tours defending Jews and Israel, which I'm proud to do because I love Israel and love the Jewish faith. I spend endless hours with Dennis Prager over the years studying the Torah. Sometimes it feels like I'm defending Israel in public more than your own government. My experience on college campuses matches a recent Harvard Harris poll, which reported 48% of 18 to 24-year-old Americans support Hamas over Israel. Even in young MAGA circles, Israel's losing support. We are getting huge crowds of 4,000 to 5,000 students on some of my college tours. My campus visits are becoming like a rock concert atmosphere filled with conservative patriots. Yet on these campus visits, I'm constantly confronted with, for example, all these being in quotes, Israel is an apartheid state. Or why does Israel conduct ethnic cleansing? Why is America subsidizing Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people? Is American aid helping to subsidize Israel's free health care? Israel and the Jews are running U.S. foreign policy. Israel and the Jews are responsible for 9/11. Defending Israel is not in our U.S. national interest. Why is Israel trying to drag us into a war in the Middle East? End of quotes here. Okay, continuing with Charlie's letter to BB. Above are just a sampling of the negative Israel Jewish comments and questions I confront on college campuses. I'm accused of being a paid apologist for Israel when I defend her. However, if I don't defend Israel strongly enough, I'm accused of being anti Semitic. I know you've got a seven front war, and my kvetching pales in comparison. Kvetching is a Yiddish word for griping and complaining here, okay? So good on Charlie that he even knew this Yiddish word, which he probably picked up from Dennis Prager, who he said he spent hours with studying the Torah. But I'm trying to convey to you that Israel is losing support even in conservative circles. This should be a five-alarm fire. I'm often asked, why is Israel killing so many innocent civilians in Gaza? I know Israel goes to great lengths by dropping flyers and even calling civilians to clear out of areas about to be bombed. I know Israel posts maps showing which areas should be evacuated. I know that Hamas uses civilians as human shields, but 90% of the younger generations get their news from social media and podcasts, and there is very little pushback or fact checking by the Israeli government and or pro-Israel supporters in the media, especially the social media. I strongly suggest Israel not always depend on subcontracting their information war efforts to surrogates in America. Mr. Prime Minister, I urge you to revamp your information warfare strategy from top to bottom. Sometimes the impression is given that Israel thinks everyone hates them, so why care about winning over hearts and minds? If there's any truth to this impression, I urge you to consider that social media and podcasts is where you fight for the hearts and minds of the younger generation. Obviously, all this negative Israel propaganda on social media easily translates into pro Hamas, free Palestine sentiment on many college campuses. Here are some unsolicited recommendations my team and I suggest if you're open minded to a communications reset. Build a rapid response media team. Put together pro Israel experts who can fact check misinformation in real time. Launch an Israel Truth Network with centralized, shareable resources. Invite released hostages on a U.S. speaking tour to tell truth about Hamas. Interview everyday Israelis, Jewish, Arab, Druze, religious, secular, to show the world who Israel really is. Do a better job explaining the Iranian threat in Israel's own voice, not just through Americans. Rebuild Israel's social media presence like a political campaign. Define the candidate. Fight back in the first person and stop retreating from the battlefield of ideas. Wow, phenomenal advice from maybe the nation's best to ever do it, at least in this past generation, before Charlie was assassinated. Okay, and here's the closing remarks here of Charlie Kirk's letter to Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Prime Minister, stop this retreat. Get in the information warfight. The front lines of this war are on social media. Other than a few guerrilla operations, there's very little Israel-created content. I saw that Israel has increased its hasbara budget by 20 times. Hasbara, by the way, is the Hebrew word for public relations. Okay, so I saw that Israel has increased its hasbara budget by 20 times. Now use it to create original content and blast it everywhere. To sum up, Israel must reshape its communication strategy as a political campaign headquarter for truth. Fill it with young fighters who know the digital battlefield. Stop letting enemies define Israel. Start defining her yourself. Israel has enormous capabilities. Use them. From my vantage point, the status quo is not working. Israel's getting crushed on social media, and you're losing younger generations of Americans, even among MAGA conservatives. In my opinion, you're losing the information war, which will eventually translate into less political and military support from America. The Holy Land is so important to my life, and it pains me to see support for Israel slip away. Feel free to contact me on my private number below if you would like to discuss this further. Sincerely, Charlie Kirk. Wow. Wow. What a letter. And obviously, a total refutation of all the allegations about Charlie's heart for Israel and for the Jewish people following his murder by the grifters and the anti-Israel toxic YouTubers, who have exploited Charlie's death, both to grift off of it, as well as knowing that he can't defend himself anymore. And of course, his wife, Erica, as a grieving wife, is too busy, with grief and having taken over Turning Point USA and now raising two children without their father. Of course, this isn't her priority to tell these YouTube influencers and podcasters what you're saying about Charlie's not true. But the letter was released, and I'm doing my small part in my little corner of YouTube, not being this huge influencer, but doing my part to get the content of this letter out there. And Charlie offered Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu, who, by the way, we all know is one of the most gifted communicators of our day. There's no one in public office of any country that speaks as well as Benjamin Netanyahu. And hopefully, this supremely gifted public speaker himself will have the savvy to take Charlie's advice seriously and get into what Charlie referred to as the public relations war, or the social media war, the information war. And it needs to begin now. And I see that Netanyahu himself has at least picked up some of the pace in making his own appearances on a lot of YouTube and YouTube episodes and podcasts. But it's true that he needs to create an army of others besides him. He can't do it all on his own. Anyway, I thought it was important to share the contents of this letter, that the truth come out. In the next episode, hopefully I'll get done it in the next couple days, I will parse over the content of Trump's and Netanyahu's speech yesterday concerning the dawn of an eternal and forever peace, in Trump's word, there in the Middle East. This is Steve the tour guide signing off. And of course, if you want to treat me to a cup of coffee, you always can by way of my Ko-fi link, which I provide at the bottom of each video in the extended description of the video. This is Steve the tour guide signing off, wishing you a phenomenal day wherever you are. Bye-bye.